Hi, Steve.
Hey.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Mark. And hi, IOP.
Hi, Mark.
Okay, I think when we start, Steve will canvass everybody to see if anybody's started on SHIP 4 who's attending.
Yep. I wonder.
Okay, I think that's a nice specific question from IOP as well to get started when we do.
Hmm.
Okay, everybody. This is a less structured session than we had a couple of weeks ago when we were doing the webinars. We thought a lunchtime slot was just, something we could do where people can come along and ask their own specific questions. I think because it's less structured, we've got a lot less people present. So if you want to unmute and turn on your cameras, and we have it more like a small meeting around a table, feel free to. So you don't have to raise your hands to ask a question or anything. You can just unmute and turn the camera on and participate, or stay as a lurker, as they say, and that's fine as well. We'll just give one more minute for a few people to rush in and join. Hi, Graham. Good to see you in person, kind of.
Oh,
Almost in person.
my hair's all gone.
I made up for it, don't worry. I'll carry us both.
You're looking quite, when I first saw you, you're looking quite biblical. Something like sort of, Joseph coming down from the mountain or something. You know what I mean? Or is it, was it Joseph?
I'm going for a cross between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Kurt Russell.
All right.
I think it's a pretty good set of role models.
Yeah.
And
Jack Charlton.
I'm okay with Kurt Russell. He hasn't done anything really bad in the last 6 months, has he?
No.
No.
So yeah, I wouldn't mind asking. We a lot of our customers, we're moving them. They're going to go to 4, but we're moving them right up to the latest 3. So I think the logic behind that is that it's going to be that sort of. What about the feedback from you guys? Are you finding that sort of people are moving that way? They're moving right up to sort of the 3. I think what was it, 3.8 point whatever, and then we'll flick them over to 4 then.
347 is the latest one.
Yeah, I think 3.4.7 is the place IDPs need to be right now.
Yeah.
If you're at 4, great, but you want to get to that point, and you can probably get to that point within the existing footprint that you already have in terms of the dependencies, the Tomcat, Java, that sort of thing. 347 and those versions at 3.4 are going to be very good for then moving over to Java 11 and the newer Tomcats and Jetties that you're going to need for that. And then you can go to 4, where you're going to need those things. 347 is also the place to, look at your deprecation warnings and things like that you're going to need to look through. And there's a lot of that out there in people's configs, but the config should get more streamlined.
Yeah.
Generally, when you get to the last version of 3, there's only a few things you need to change to get it working on 4.
Yeah.
Once you're on 4, then there's a whole set of stuff which you can keep with your current config, but it's best to then increment over to the new way 4 works.
Yeah, I think that's the mindset, especially for the institutions as well. You know what I mean? And it's sort of looking at that way. So yeah, so that's nearly sort of completed there. And yeah, nobody sort of said just go straight to 4. So it's but yeah, that's good. Oh, that's good. That's good feedback. Thank you.
Have we tackled the questions in the chat, Mark? Should we
I
go
think
through those or wait?
we were kicking off with SHIB 4 and talking about that. So
right, yep.
And I think it was Mark asked that.
Yeah, so we're planning on just migrating over sort of next month, basically, because with the start of term coming up, there's not really a good time to do it before the end of before the end of the year, really. We don't really want to be doing it at the end of December either, when it's just about to end of life. So this is really the next viable slot, and it's basically if anybody else has done it. We've got it running in tests at the moment. I haven't noticed any obvious regressions, other than there was one I emailed it to the mailing list about, and that's because I had some sort of old config that the deprecation warnings hadn't picked up. So that's basically. I mean, I'd also be interested to know and what sorts of ways is the configuration, the way of doing things changing from version 3 to version 4, because the 2 to 3 there was quite a big difference. 3 to 4 it seems a little bit more incremental, but I've noticed there is some new configuration files.
The main thing that I think might catch people out is if you're using binary attributes coming in from LDAP, the way that they are configured changes in a way that can catch you out, in that it's an LDAP property element at the moment, and it has to change to a binary attributes element. Otherwise, it just ignores it silently. So if you're using that for something like the source attribute for edge person targeted ID, all your EPT IDs will change. Which I suspect if you've been running it in test and you haven't noticed, you're probably not going to get caught by that, but other people might.
Well, I know we don't. That's the sort of thing, you know, people using Active Directory might encounter, because if they're using GUIDs for their source attribute, that might another reason not to use Windows for servers, to be honest.
The other changes are sort of more underneath the bonnet, in that they've changed out the Spring framework, they've changed out the LDAP library, which is where the binary attributes thing comes in. Yep. And I think they've changed, they've gone up a level in terms of servlet requirements and stuff, which is why the Tomcat and Jetty requirements have gone up a bit and stuff like that.
That's something worth noting, actually. If you're using LDAP S, you probably want to change to the LDAPtive provider in 347, because it will almost certainly break if you go from like 3.3 up and you've got LDAP S. It's almost certainly going to, I don't think I've specifically done that, but I've effectively done that in builds.
Yeah, I think I did that already when we went from to 346. I think I noticed that there's some chat on the mailing list about changing over to LDAP for performance improvements, as well as you know, sort of forward sort of ongoing compatibility. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I'm using LDAPtive now, but I'll double check that.
Okay, I suspect Shift4 will be something we'll come back to again during this hour. Who's here from the IOP, just so I can put a name to a face? Or
it's Sally.
Hi, hi Sally.
Hi, yeah, I think Matt's here as well, Matt Keane, so we're both here.
Okay, hi Matt. Sally, do you want to ask your questions so everybody can hear it?
Yes, basically it's about IDPs that have extra scopes in use. Now, normally we just go to refeds and perhaps we just see one scope listed and lots of different scopes coming through. And we wondered what was the process for the IDP to actually put that onto refeds, but they decide not to. We can add extra records. We have to monitor failure reports all the time to make sure we're picking up the extra scopes.
Shall I answer if nobody else is?
I think
Steve's going to answer. Go on then, Steve.
Right.
Raised your hand.
Okay. Basically, if the scopes aren't in the metadata that you're receiving for the organisation, then technically giving people access with that scope is a mistake, because it could be someone pretending one way or another. We do have a page on our website that lists, you know, scrolling through 50 megabytes of metadata files, an absolute pain and bad for the eyes. But we have a handy page on the Federation website that lists IDPs with their scopes, and if there's something like a local authority with hundreds of the darn things, then there is a wee button you can click on, and it lists the separate scopes underneath. So you can find out which scopes they've actually got without needing to go off to look at refeds.
As Steve was saying, that the critical thing is any scope that's in the UKfed metadata has been vetted by us as that organization having the right to assert that scope through demonstrating ownership of the domain.
Yeah. And we're
and so if they're asserting something which isn't in there, you have no way of trusting it.
Okay. Okay, that's quite interesting, because what we find is Germany in particular loves scopes. So if they're very diligent and they actually put it onto refeds, I'm quite happy with that. What is happening is that sometimes they're just putting one scope onto refeds, and what we're getting is totally different. There's 101 varieties coming in, but it is actually kind of the end of their domain, their scopes. You can see who it is. So at the moment, we're adding that to the records and authorizing them.
That should really be in their metadata, though. I mean,
Sorry,
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It should be. I mean, if we get, say, there's one IDP in Slovenia has 29 scopes, but all 29 are listed in refed, so I'm quite happy with that. What we get is that Japan will assert one, and then they'll come through with a different, it's slightly different, so I can tell who they are. Germany, again, are sending us multiple scopes at a time. So it's a case of like, where do you guys stand on how does the IDP update refeds? Are they supposed to do that? And it's just a case they're not doing it?
Sally, can I just ask what you mean by you see refeds? I mean, is that the MET tool that has the metadata, or where are you going to find the?
Basically, go to the Metadata Explorer tool.
Oh yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah.
And then you can search for who they are, and what it'll do is it'll give you the identity ID and all the known scopes for them underneath. But what we're finding is they're not actually putting on all of the scopes that they're using. And sometimes they just have one.
Could this potentially be IDPs that are using the regular expression true in a scope? I don't quite know how they render in refeds in the MET tool.
Do you have a concrete example of an entity?
You can go with Bremen. They have one scope listed in refeds.
So idp.unibremen. Unibremen.de.
You want to play at home, guys, for Met refeds links in the chat.
Yeah, no, they have an IDP SSO descriptor with one scope with regexp equals false. So what that is, if you don't know, is you can do regular expressions on scopes. Some federations allow that, but theirs isn't doing that. So if they are asserting scopes outside of the one that's noted there, then that's something they really should be updating, either that university or DFN, the German Federation, to match reality, basically.
If I've got about 10, I suppose I could go back to them, but that could be a bit sort of time consuming to sort of say, please, can you update this? I don't know how they'd react to that. Do I go to DFN instead?
Yeah, I would suggest probably raising with DFN is the way to do it. In the UK, you would certainly be, you contact us at the UK Federation, and we would go and approach our members.
Okay, thank you.
There's also the Educate support team that work. I've just put the email address in there, and we work with interfederated issues as well. So that sounds like the IOP SP registered in the UK Federation and Bremen in DFN. We should be able to help you.
So did you say there were some examples out on different federations as well?
There's been quite a few. Basically, it's a university called Meisei, MEISEI, that's in Japan. They again have a scope listed, but they transmit something additional to that.
I mean, if it's an issue you're encountering multiple federations, then yeah, I would suggest drop support@edugain.org a mail with the details of who they are, what basically the issues you're seeing, and it's their job to then go and speak to the relevant federations, who can then speak to their membership. So that might be an easy single point of contact for you, where it can kind of fan out across the federations.
Okay, no, that's lovely.
Obviously, you're welcome to raise the tickets with us at the UK Federation, but we're just going to be an extra hop in that, so it's probably not worth it in this case. But if there's ever any doubt, come to us, and then we can direct it in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. No, there's quite a few. I think what's happened with the pandemic is a whole number of IDPs have suddenly come online, and they're starting, I call it like transmitting all sorts of scopes. So we just monitor the failure logs every 12 hours to see why they're failing, and then we can see all these additional scopes which are not listed anyway. So at the moment, our only sort of recourse is just to add multiple scopes, but it's like, what is the correct procedure in this instance? I really don't know.
I mean, I can totally understand why you're doing that as a short-term fix, but yeah, you know, the reasons, as I said, the scopes exist in metadata is to stop one organization impersonating another to get access to the resources they paid for.
Sorry, a quick question. Oh,
so
sorry.
Definitely short-term fix.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alex.
So when you say there are extra scopes, Sally, are these subdomains of the, you know, the canonical scope in metadata, or is it just random kind of domains that could come from anywhere?
No, it is actually like part of the subdomains. You can see that it's Bremen, you can see it's Mazi. The difficulty we've got is that we would have to do a wildcard, star.bremen, star.mazi, to actually get them in, because they're coming in with all kinds of weird combinations like FBO9, FBO1, FBO3. But we can tell roughly who it is and let them in at the moment. So it's just to sort of get us over that hurdle so everybody's got access. And it's where do we go long term for the raise this issue?
I mean, it might be down to, you know, as simple as a misunderstanding on the other end that if you've got the scope registered, it covers all the subdomains, which according to the specs, it doesn't. So it may be a misunderstanding as much as anything else. If they are asserting many subdomains of scopes, the way you would do it, would act, according to the SAML spec, is you would have every subdomain list, you know, specifically enumerated, which is why we have, for example, you know, some schools IDPs with hundreds of scopes in, or to do a regular expression version where it would essentially say star dot, you know, wherever dot the, which I guess doesn't help you guys unless you've got some way of, oh no, because you're just looking at the failure logs. So the regular expression should deal with that. Yeah, I suggest if the support team take it up, they can figure out what's going on.
Just to add to what I was saying, so this is Matt from IB Publishing as well. So we got an example in Spain. It's the Spanish National Research Council. The acronym is CSIC essentially. And again, we see all these sort of subdomains. My assumption, maybe a very poor assumption here, is that those subdomains relate to specific facilities that sort of make up that overall consortia deal. So I'm wondering whether that's the reason why we're seeing that information being supplied. I'd love to sort of understand the rationale of the actual IDP, but that was my thinking, that we're trying to sort of restrict access to particular facilities within that entire organization. Yeah, that's the way you usually do it. So if an organization wanted to do the entire, you know, say the entire organization, you just have the main domain. But if you needed to be able to split it up more granularly, as you said, you might do that. So looking at the metadata, CSIC have 152 scopes listed in their metadata. Okay. So, you know, they have csic.es, cab.csic.es, cabd.csic.es, etc. I think the challenge we face is then tying that up with our fulfillment system in terms of making sure that only those facilities relate to that consortia deal get access, and any entities outside of that license don't.
Hi everyone. I've just got a question which I've just been asking to Mark, and I thought it was probably a good idea just to ask you all here as well. So I should just say I'm a librarian recently starting in more sort of a systems role, so excuse my sort of ignorance if I get the sort of the terms and the things wrong here. I'm sure you guys will be able to help me out here. But I've got a question which it sort of relates to what my understanding of how attributes work from Open Athens in comparison with Shibboleth. So from what I understand, and please do correct me if I'm wrong here, is it that Open Athens sort of takes the approach that a resource is set up in the resource catalogue for attributes to be released, but is Shibboleth UK Fed a bit different in that, again, as I understand this, attributes are released to all suppliers through the UKf metadata? I guess what I'm trying to say, it seems from the Open Athens side, it seems to be a bit more work on the part of the institution to set things up, but from Shibboleth it seems to be a little bit less on the part and more on from the perspective of the service provider. And the sort of concern I had and colleagues had around the OA side, if that is the case, it sort of means a bit more extra work for the librarians and perhaps might lead to more sort of error messages for users. Does that make any sense at all?
Okay, I know we've got a couple of colleagues from Open Athens actually in this session. So,
yeah, I mean, let me give a quick overview there. So I think the simple answer actually is no. So Shib and Open Athens work in exactly the same way. The administrator of that system chooses which attributes are released to which service providers. How that mechanically happens is different for the two, because, you know, in Shibboleth you would go and edit XML files to say this particular service is allowed to see this attribute. In Open Athens it'll be you're clicking through the UI to set it up, and I can see Adam's on the call. He might want to say a bit more about that. But there's no philosophical difference between Shib and Open Athens here. The SP is going to be receiving whatever the IDP is configured to send. The default position for UKf IDPs is to release the pseudonymous identifiers and attributes, so eduperson targeted ID, which is the random pseudonymous string per service per user, but persistent. So the service doesn't know who the user is, but will know if it's the same person who was there a few weeks before, so they can personalize based on it. And the eduperson scoped affiliation, which is staff, student, etc. at scope. Anything beyond that is usually managed by the admin of the IDP, because it could be more personally identifiable information, so you just want to be a bit more careful with it. You know, if you want to be releasing email address or first name or last name or whatever. But there is no real difference between Shib and Open Athens in this sense. The only difference between Shib and Open Athens really is whether you're choosing to run something in-house or managed via a third party like Graham's gang do, or paying for a managed service using Open Athens. So it's just about how you procure things, basically, and how you want things run and where you need the expertise to run them.
Okay, thank you, Rhys.
Adam, did you want to chip in at all?
No, that's grand. Thanks very much, Rhys.
More importantly, Adam, are you in a bar, Adam?
No. I'm in. Do you know, everyone either thinks I'm in a bar, in a shed, but no, I'm in the garden.
It looks
just
a good place to be.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And welcome back, Adam.
I think we had a question from Kenny. Do you want to introduce yourself, Kenny, and maybe put at least a voice to a name?
All right, okay. So I'm from Edinburgh University as well, along with Mark, the other Mark Kearney. So my question really was, following on from the town hall events that happened a few weeks ago, there was mention of the metadata query service. And I was just wondering what the uptake in general was on that from IDPs.
There's no reason essentially for any IDP to not do MDQ now. It means you run things in using a lot less memory, and things are quicker to start up. Our servers are seeing about 20,000 requests a day for the aggregates and about 10,000 requests a day for MDQ. It's hard to compare though, you know, apples and oranges and everything, because every server that's consuming the aggregates will download it every day no matter what. Whereas MDQ is per service you go to. So a single IDP might issue, say you were going to 100 services in a day. Say your users were going to 100 services in a day, your IDP would issue 100 MDQ requests. Simplifying here because there's caching. and caching lifetimes and whatnot. But yeah, so it's kind of hard to compare by request count, but just for your info, that's what we're seeing. In terms of unique IP addresses, querying the services. So this is all stats from yesterday. So we have daily stats. 1,617 unique IP addresses grabbing the aggregates, 566 IP addresses grabbing MDQ. So I would say about 3/4 of metadata access is for the aggregates and 1/4 for MDQ. I think that's more, inertia than anything else. People who have stuff set up which they just haven't touched. People will tend to switch to MDQ either when the server keeps running out of memory, or when they're building something new.
Yeah, okay, inertias are a reason as well. I think that's. Yeah. I was just curious to see what everybody else was doing. Yeah, thank you.
It works pretty well. So when I was Cardiff, Cardiff, I used to work at Cardiff University. Their production IDP servers have been using the MDQ aggregate for 4 years now, I think, since we first published it. With no issues. There's no real reason not to anymore. Sorry, Alex.
No, I mean, to go a little bit further than yourself. Yes, there's no reason for an IDP not to use MDQ. And one of the work packages we're doing is for SPs at the moment. So if your SP offloads discovery, the SP can do MDQ, because you don't need the whole aggregate to find the whole set of IDPs in the world. But there's the one class of entities that we've not been able to use or not being able to migrate to MDQ are the SPs that do their own discovery. So one of the things we're working on is essentially a cut down metadata feed in JSON that may be able to move SPs to using MDQ. But I'm not really sure if it doesn't look like there's many SP operators on here. I mean, I see IOP. So I guess this is more, or maybe places like Edinburgh. Actually, you've got a lot of SPs registered. I might try and get in touch and see whether there are any that are kind of running out of memory using the aggregates, and maybe see whether it might be useful for those SPs to move to MDQ.
We have had cases, not so much memory, but it was SPs that are using systemd, and the timeout was, the full timeout's a bit aggressive, and you'd end up that it would take so long to download the metadata that it would exceed the timeout, and systemd would then try and restart the service, and you'd just basically end up in a infinite loop of the SP never actually fully starting up and just constantly restarting.
Yep, and if you switch to MDQ, it'll start up in a fraction of a second instead.
I think as well, a lot of, and we're probably not unique in this, is a lot of the internal SPs will not actually be registered with the UK Federation. They'll just be purely internal. So for a lot of those, we've actually solved that by just pointing them directly at the IDP they're interested in. So it's really only ones that are actually servicing other institutions as well as their own, where this is an issue. But it would be good to.
That's actually a good example of where you might want to use MDQ instead, because it depends how you've pointed your SPs at just your IDP's metadata, because if you pointed it to MDQ, it would always get the latest version of your metadata as published in the UK Fed, and only that one. Whereas if you've manually added the IDP's metadata, you're going to have to go around and update each SP if you make any changes to your IDP. Unless
that's a very good point. That has kind of had my head scratching if we ever do decide to upgrade our certificates on our IDP, how to sort of roll that out, and that would, because I'm aware that the Federation, they can present both forms of the metadata, simultaneously for a limited period of time. I've used that facility in the past, but it's not so easy to do if you've got hard-coded metadata on SPs.
Actually, in fact, so if you were running an SP that only cared about a single IDP, the Edinburgh IDP, for example, there are two ways you could do that. You could just configure them to use the MDQ service, as I just suggested, and then it'll each time the cached version from MDQ runs out, it'll go get the new version. The second way is to actually you would add a link to the aggregate. So having a metadata provider of type whatever it is, file back to HTTP metadata, whatever it is, I can't remember offhand. You could actually point that at the query for your IDP on the MDQ service. So it would basically act like the normal thing does of checking 4 times a day or whatever, and only updating if it's changed. But it would only go to the bit of metadata representing your IDP, and it would constantly keep that in memory. So you can kind of pretend it's an aggregate, but it's an aggregate of 1 because that's the only thing in that particular query. So there's 2 different ways you can do that.
Well, that's really interesting. Would that also give us the facility to maintain 2 copies of the metadata at once, like Mark was suggesting earlier? This is a hypothetical question, of course.
So we're doing 2 copies of the metadata.
So, on say a certificate update. I think, Mark, you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah. Well, I think
you mean for cert rollover?
Yes.
Yeah, so what would be happening there is you would just treat your SP would work like any other SP on the Federation. So, certificate rollover is create a new, keep it, add a new certificate into metadata, give it time to flow around the Federation before you make the change on your server. That would work perfectly well because you would add it into the metadata. You would talk to us to add it into the UKf metadata for you. It would then appear in that MDQ query response that all of your internal SPs were using. You leave it for a few days. Then you make the change on the IDP and it's all fine. And then you remove it from the Federation metadata, which removes it from the MDQ response. And then it disappears from your SP cached version as well.
Brilliant.
So yeah, that would be one way of doing cert rollover for all of your SPs, including your internal one, without manually doing it on all of the SPs.
Which sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And then we've got all these horrible ones that are using sort of bespoke implementations of like SAML and you're copying things like Adobe where you're copying and pasting like certificates or metadata into it and then uploading it to. Yeah, it's not going to solve those ones, but it would certainly solve a lot of our, I know the library, for example, run a lot of internal SSSPs and our applications guys as well. So yeah, it's still the less people you have to worry about, the better, definitely.
Okay.
There was one thing Reese was saying about the querying the URL for your endpoint, not for your endpoint, for your entity ID, i.e. the mdq.uk federation/entities, your entity ID. You need to make sure that if you follow the example for the Federation aggregate, that you make sure you've got the correct certificate, because it's not the same certificate that's used for the aggregate. There is a different certificate used for the metadata publication for signing.
Yep. As John said, it's different. All the MDQ responses are signed, of course, and the cert is different, but you can get this. The MDQ service is on mdq.ukfederation.org.uk instead of metadata. And the MDQ certificate is linked to on there, and you can confirm the fingerprints with the help desk in the usual ways. Yeah.
Okay, and that's for end, I think, of the listed questions we had on the chat. So, you know, feel free to just turn on your camera and turn on your mic if you want to ask an open question now or a follow-up to anything we've been talking about.
One quick comment to make, leading on from what our Edinburgh friends were saying. All the bilateral stuff that people have to do for some enterprise things is annoying as hell. But in some cases necessary because the limitations on the other side of things, as it usually on the enterprise end. Feel free to please get in touch with us if anyone ever asks you to do bilateral stuff, because you know, the more we know about how much specific organizations are asking people to do bilateral, the more we can go and poke them and ask them to sort the game out. You know, if someone's asking all 1,000 and well, how many members do we have at the moment?
1,200, is it, nearly?
1,205, I think, something like that. If somebody's asking all 1,205 of our members to do a bilateral thing, maybe they should speak to us about figuring out how to improve how they're doing things on their end.
Actually, if I could just cut in there, that rather connects to a question that our CTO asked me to raise. He says, it seems like we're seeing an increasing number of institutions that want us to talk, and I think he means via SAML, to their Azure AD that isn't in the Federation. I wonder if this is a wider trend and one they are tracking. Should I be pushing back on this? So I guess certainly it sounds like we should be pushing back on that if we can, although as a commercial supplier, the customer is always right, so we're perhaps not in such a good position to push back. But I don't know if Azure AD and similar cloud services are being seen as a problem with people universities trying to set up bilateral arrangements for some reason.
I think it depends on the application here. So there enterprise applications, shall we call them? You know, if you want to be integrating with Salesforce or, you know, those kind of things.
No, this is the other way around. So we're the SP, but the people who run the IDP in UK universities seem to have forgotten that they run an IDP and are trying to get us to integrate directly with Azure, still via SAML, but via sort of Azure's SAML capabilities, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the main reasons the UK Federation exists is to stop all of our members having to do the same bits of work over and over and over again in setting up bilateral relations. So it's about managing economies of scale or getting better economies of scale. And people who are insisting that they want to do the Azure AD thing, if that's what they really want to do, then, you know, they have every right to do it. But they're causing themselves and the service a lot more work than is strictly necessary, and will be causing themselves pain in the future because, you know, the way Azure manages, the way AD manages metadata and certificates and stuff is not quite as flexible as the way we do things and have done it for the last decade. So, you know, I'll give you some examples. One of the JISC services, student voter registration, is a SAML service, and we do support people who want to come to us with AAD, but it's absolutely not the preferred mechanism. We much prefer people to just connect via the UK Federation, but we do allow a direct connection from, say, ADFS or Azure AD for organizations that don't have another SAML IDP. So in our case, this is more like independent providers who've never had the history of working on the UK Federation. So they don't have a SHIB or Open Athens IDP at the moment. So I can kind of understand where they're coming from. You know, you don't want to set up and run shibboleth just for one application when they've got an AAD IDP. But it's not desirable.
The example that was given, which I won't mention here, was a well-known university which does have an IDP registered in the UK Access Management Federation. So I suspect it may be a case of the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing within the university is in question, perhaps.
I mean, we certainly know anecdotally that, you know, in some cases the SAML IDP is seen as an IT thing and is used university-wide. So, you know, Edinburgh is one of those good examples, and when I was at Cardiff, you know, it was used for library and IT stuff, and we had 30 or 40 services connected to it internally. Oxford have got like something ridiculous, like 300 services registered in their federation, in the UK Federation. Whereas in some, it's seen as a library thing. And, you know, it's thought of in the institution as a way of accessing journals, and it's not even considered as a way of accessing enterprise applications. So I think, you know, your mileage may vary based in different institutions. And I guess there's a bit of an information drive that could happen to try to raise awareness a bit. But yeah, so it's very, very different in different institutions.
Well, I was going to chip in and just say that, you know, what we've steered people towards is the idea that they can delegate their authentication from a Shibboleth IDP, or you know, if they use Open Athens, they can do that as well, to Azure or ADFS, so that they get the single sign-on experience for all purposes through that single route. But that the IDP that we see in the Federation is not that Azure or ADFS, but the SHIB or the Open Athens IDP. And a lot of the ways that we challenge the barrier is, well, if we are consuming the Federation metadata and we have to put in another IDP for that organization, they may appear in discovery twice. You know, that's one case that we had with Student Voter very recently. And that was a bit of a deal breaker for them, because, you know, we were like, well, we can't easily remove this. We could in the interim, but it's not going to be easy to always be fudging the metadata to have things removed for a specific SP. So yeah, it's much better if they can do that sort of thing, and we've got some guidance there on that, which I'll put the link in the chat in a second. But if they can look at identity as a whole thing and how they do single sign-on for the whole organization rather than just in pockets, then that's going to be better in the long run.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty key point there. Some institutions will be preferring to do AAD rather than, say, using SHIB or Open Athens, because they might have all the fancy stuff turned on their AAD for authentication, as in multi-factor and conditional access, you know, all the conditional stuff for risk management. And as John said, a way of getting the best of both worlds, so you get the scalability of the UK Federation and the quite nice stuff that AAD can do for authentication, is to connect the two so that they authenticate against each other. And John's put the link in the chat window. And then you use, you know, AAD. Basically, somebody gets sent to your SHIB ID, to the SHIB IDP to authenticate. It's in turn goes to AAD, authenticates the user, comes back to SHIB IDP, which then does all the stuff properly for multilateral federation. So you get the best of both worlds.
I think that's roughly the reply I gave to my boss, so that's good.
I think we had that question from Sally. We've got a link in there, but it might be a chance to plug training coming up. Is that Sally at, is it West Scotland?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so there are training courses that just run, where a lot of people who turn up to those are exactly the scenario you've set out. The only problem with the training courses is they have traditionally been designed to be 15 people sat next to each other on laptops in a room. So obviously that course is all a bit on hold at the moment, and it doesn't, the way it was written by the guy who wrote it, i.e. me about 5 years ago, is that it doesn't lend itself very well to being switched to an online course. We have a plan to, it needs updating as well, so we're going to update it and make it a bit more online friendly, but that's not a short-term thing. It'll be a little while before the updated course will relaunch, being part online, having an online option and an in-person option. But we do have documentation available on the website about how to set things up kind of from scratch, trying not to be too technical, and John can talk a bit more about that, I guess. But also the UK Fed help desk is there, so you know, if you've inherited an IDP and you kind of know maybe a bit about what's going on, but you need help understanding what all the config does, the UK Fed Help Desk can certainly provide some free help and guidance there.
I think that would be useful, because I think one of our problems is we've inherited sort of multiples because we've had various mergers over the years and bits of things that are in place from previous institutions, and trying to untangle things. And I know you mentioned before things institutions appearing twice. That's happening to us a lot because I think we've more than one. So.
Yeah, I said there's the free help desk, which is service@ukfederation.org.uk. Drop them an email, and most of those are on this call, where you can, say, can you help me understand what the setup is, or here's a config file, can you tell me what this bit does, because I don't know.
What was that?
We have someone will type it into the chat window.
Thanks.
We do have a consultancy service as well, where you can pay per day or whatever for a bit more in-depth help with things. But I would suggest obviously try the free help desk option.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially first we just want to understand what we've actually got set up.
Yeah, totally.
That's great. Thank you.
Is in the chat. Oh, same time as Mark.
Okay, it's open time now.
There's a bit of chat at the last meeting about the REFED stuff. So we are currently looking at this ourselves, and I think it's looking a bit more positive. We've actually got a business use case for a start that helps. But it was just to see if any other IDPs had enabled REFED's RNS attribute release, and what pitfalls they had in terms of pushing it through, in terms of particularly from the data protection angle, which I think has been our organisation, our biggest concern with the sort of release of personal data to what appeared to be arbitrary, downstream services.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, you've just made the plug I wanted to give, which is to respond to that. I know Alex is keen to convene some kind of discussion where we can get interested parties who either have deployed RNS and made the argument internally, or people who would like to know the arguments to be made, or even other people in the institution who can facilitate those. So I think fairly soon we might be sending around an email inviting various people to come to a session where we can build on that. But I'd also, again, invite anybody here, if you're interested in being part of an RNS discussion, whether or not it's talking about maybe blockers in your institutions, or how you remove blockers, or any real observations, please get in touch at that email to service@ukfederation.org.uk, and we'll keep you involved in that conversation. I don't know if Alex wants to chip in at all.
I can do. My internet line's a bit flaky at the moment, so I'll give it a go. So I've compiled the list of the IDPs that currently support the RNS. I'm in the process of drafting an email. It's going to go round that's going to ask if they want to if these IDP operators are willing to share information, either in a forum of some kind, or whether it's a briefing document or something like that. So I've not been able to get onto that yet. What I have had a trawl through our past calls about the IDPs that have added the RNS support, and no one's really said anything in those about the any kind of barriers to adding RNS. They've talked about the drivers for it, though, and mostly it's access to Globus, which I think is a login to
yes,
National Science Framework.
Yes, that's why we're kind of, that's our business case at the moment.
As well, okay, yeah. And there's a couple more. There's like CERN as well, I think, mandates that IDPs must signal RNS support.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some NIH stuff really either requires it or desires it, as in the US health thing, you know, National Institute of Health, because they do a lot of global programs. I mean, just for info, when I got Cardiff to adopt this, one of the things I pointed out to the governance people we ran this past is that, so, you know, what RNS is doing from an IDP point of view is asserting like a name and an email address, essentially, plus a persistent identifier. And people worried about that from a data protection point of view, asserting that information on request of the user, because remember, this is all user driven, because the user has specifically tried to go to a specific site which is wanted it. If you just remember that every time your user emails anyone in the world, your SMTP server releases their name and email address to, so exactly the same set of information to an email server anywhere that could be anywhere in the world to accept that information. So
Well,
it is releasing literally.
It's easier to spoof SMTP though.
Exactly. What I mean is, you know, if the university has decided, as I'm sure most of them have done, to not whitelist email servers that you are willing to, your SMTP server to talk to, then you're actually not releasing really any more information than that. And it's a lot more controlled because RNS services are manually verified on by federation operators as being relevant to research and scholarship, and you know, have all the business vetting stuff that we do as part of running the federation.
Yeah, I think that's a really useful analogy. However, I think the blocker we're finding is that our data protection officer agrees in that kind of a statement, you know, what the purposes of this are, and it all sounds very reasonable. But in our case, it's her job to ensure that there's legally watertight agreements in place and due diligence and processes have been followed. Where you have to create and publish a data protection impact assessment on these changes and so on. So I don't think the argument is there and it's already been won. It's the what form of words, and is it contractual, is it legitimate interest, and then tying down as well the actual identities that an IDP has. So we have alumni and applicants in our IDP, but we're planning only to release personal data for staff, students, and visiting staff and visiting students, and not alumni and applicants. So it's just some of the detail, the legalese and the detail, and other people who, you know, because it's her job she has to sign off on something, and then she's the one who's kind of hauled up in front of the senior management if anything goes wrong and complaints come in.
Yep, totally understandable. I had exactly those same conversations with our governance people at Cardiff. Yeah. And in the end, it was just, we had the conversation about, you know, risk benefit, and it just, obviously every university comes to its own decision. But we came to the decision that it was relatively low risk and relatively high benefit for that low risk, and so it was worth doing it. And the other thing with Cardiff is also all of that information was pretty much available on the public-facing website anyway for all the staff, their name and their email address, which had been provided for business purposes. So, you know, as I said, in the end, it's not a clear-cut thing. It's a risk-benefit for each institution to decide.
So I think that's why it would be useful for the stuff Alex is trying to get together about that. You know, what has been done to date so far. And you know, there is a risk, of course, that some people might have just turned it on without giving due diligence. They could be a bit nervous about publicising that.
Yeah, sure. There's also, there are some ambiguities in the RNS specification as well. So having had a look back through our calls where we've asked people, oh, so what are you releasing? And some say, you know, it's display name, and others say it's a given name and a surname. So there's some bits of ambiguity in there as well that hopefully when RNS version 2 comes out, we can kind of nail these things down. But I think we're still exploring the problem space rather than having, you know, a formal set of words that can be sent round to everyone. As Rita is saying, I guess every university has similar obligations, but different structures and different people that are tasked to achieve those obligations.
Okay, I think we're coming up fairly close to the end of the hour. I suspect we won't have one of these sessions in August because of leave, etc. But I certainly think we'll be planning to have a drop-in session in September. It might be that that's when we try to have the RNS type focused one as well. Maybe that's in parallel. I suspect, Alex, the RNS one might take place under sort of Chatham House rules. This session has been recorded, so if your video camera was on and caught you at the pub in the background rather than you having to be in the office or something, drop me a line if you've got any reason to be edited out. Otherwise, this will be going up on the UK Federation website in a day or two. Service at ukfederation.org.uk. If you've got any follow-up questions on any of the topics or anything you wanted to ask directly rather than maybe in front. So thank you everybody for coming, and we should be having another one in September. And I might add, it's very extra thanks to publishers coming in, because again, teasing out publisher issues is often quite challenging. So real appreciation to everybody on the publisher side and institutions as well, but I think you know what I mean. Okay guys, thank you very much.
Brilliant, thanks for that. It's been really useful. I think these stations have been a really good idea.
And we'll certainly be doing these relatively regularly now, I think. Yep, as Mark said, thanks to everyone for tuning up.
Cheers, Mark. Stay safe.
Yeah, to everybody.
And you, Reese.
Take care. Bye.
I didn't mean sort of. Yeah.
Everybody else, you take your chances.
Cheers.
Go now, Graham, before you embarrass everybody.
Yeah, I got another one this afternoon. I'm jumping on some other. I'm just living on either Zoom or Teams. That's the only thing now.
Yeah.
I seem to have my whole.
As are all of us.
Yeah.
So how are you doing, Graham? Long time no see.
Yeah, really good, thanks. Yeah, it's been difficult, you know what I mean? Because clearly, I don't know about you guys, you're far bigger than us, but the command and control part of it, I just worry about the youngsters really, where, you know, the mindfulness and things like that. Because for me, you know what I mean, I'm used to sort of talking to myself, you know what I mean? But for the youngsters, we've got a couple of apprentices and things like that. So our HR's been a bit sort of worried or concerned and things like that. But we try and meet up sort of daily, and we put the cameras on so we can see that everybody's sort of healthy and things like that. But I have noticed, I think what the youngsters want to do, they want to come back to the office and maybe all talk to each other and have this and all that, where probably I ain't that bothered, but it's, yeah, for them, it's getting out. And a lot of them sort of maybe still with their parents, or they're just working on the dining room table, or we've got a couple of our staff that, you know, single parents, and they've got kids there and they're schooling them and things like that. So I'm pretty glad it's just me, the missus, and the dog that's curled up sleeping away. But yeah, I think it's a challenge, I think, for quite a bit of stuff. But on the whole, it's been pretty good. And yeah, it's a bit strange in the FE world at the moment, but I'm not quite sure. You know, I hear that maybe universities may not be getting back till about January sometimes, maybe, you know, I mean, I was chatting to somebody at Exeter. They may not get back till January, you know, because of the maybe there's going to be a second spike or something. But how about you guys? When are you going to get back to the office, or is that sort of?
The offices reopened about a month ago for people who need to be there, and that's pretty much people who, you know, are living in a house share and having to work on their laptop on their bed or whatever. So, for example, our Bristol office, which normally has maybe 150 people in, has 3 or 4 people in at the moment, I think. I think we're opening them a little bit more now, but it's still mostly going to be working from home for most people here.
Yeah, and all the sorts of reasons to meet up are kind of the reasons why we shouldn't be meeting up to some degree.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I've just signed up for the UKSG thing because I thought, you know, it wasn't much, 30 quid, but I just thought, I feel sorry for some of the organisations because that's their big ticket item in it sometimes, you know, I mean, the big sort of, you know, meetups and things like that, you know, I mean, what about you guys? Really getting network shops going this year, April, or do you think that'll be online?
Well, we did the online network shop in April. It was going to be in person, obviously got cancelled and switched last minute to online and refocused. So it was all about member responses to, you know, how we're dealing with all this nonsense.
Yeah, I think these are great. I think what you've done here, Mark and the guys, I think it's really, really great, especially this sort of changeover period when it's shipped for and things like that. There's going to be lots of questions and things like that. So I think this is really, really great. And it's nice to get a different point of view, isn't it? So it's on that. And I like the other bit where Scott came in on the other meeting, didn't he? And things like that. That's good. That's a good bit of collaboration there and all that, because, you know, without Shibboleth, we wouldn't have a company really. So hopefully not too many people move over to ADFS or they leave Shibboleth behind. So it's we trying to get them to stay with that. But yeah, it's not too bad. But yeah, we were going to have some celebrations. Could have come up to our 10-year anniversary as Over Software. Clearly, we've been working with you guys earlier than that with GIST projects and all that prior to that at Kidderminster College. But yeah, 10 years has flown by. I just can't believe that it's
tell me about it.
Big for 10 years. But
oh, it seems a long time since you ran around with pieces of paper simulating attribute release.
I told them about that the other day and they didn't believe it. Well, half of these guys here, we don't even know what the Millennium Bug was or nothing like that. So it probably won't have bought it.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, I've got to leave.
Be on a different Zoom. Yeah. See you, Graham. Actually, we're going to catch up properly another time.
Yeah, well, we're bound some time to meet up and have a drink. So brilliant. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Do that in Adam's back garden pub.
Yeah.
Cheers, folks. Hang on, if I click that, I think I know the website.